birthday, girl.
Happy
So,
birthday. Happy birthday.
so today it's just me and the mastermind TP Square. We're gonna be kicking it back and forth, and there's some things I think we need to talk about. I sat and I watched this January 6th committee do their work, and they were supposedly sort of a fact-finding mission to see if there was enough evidence to charge former President Donald Trump with some pretty serious charges. And I was just wondering, what do our listeners think? Do you think Trump is guilty of any of the charges that may be leveled against him, some as serious as sedition? Or do you think that Trump is completely innocent and that, as he would say, it is just another witch hunt? And, I don't want to draw comparisons between presidents or, one party or other. I'm just talking about the individual, because right now there are a number of people sitting in jail, hundreds of people who have been prosecuted and brought before federal courts, tried and convicted for their actions on January 6th. So if these people who were invited by the Trump administration, and if these same people who were directed down to the Capitol by the former president himself, if they are guilty, can Trump be completely innocent? So that's the question for today. So I'd like to know what you think. The number here is 888-304-4401. Again, it's 888-304-4401. Call us and weigh in and give us your take. Witch hunt by, I guess, the Democrats? Or is this all these charges valid? Should Trump be facing the same sort of time went into the Capitol are facing? So that's the question for today. So TP, I know you watched this whole thing too, this unfold on TV. What do you think?
Well, in my opinion, just my opinion alone, I think if his followers went off of his word, his recommendation to storm the Capitol and fight like hell to save our country and take our country back, he is a co-conspirator, in that opinion. And yes, if those young men who put their lives on the line, put their family on the line, put their careers on the line, have to have their lives interrupted and ruined because they followed the words of Donald Trump, he too should be held accountable for his actions. They should not alone pay the piper for their actions, because had he not said it, they would not have done it.
I had this debate with a friend of mine who is a defense attorney, retired defense attorney. And she was saying that she does not believe there is sufficient evidence to prosecute Trump, that he did not commit an overt act. Now, I don't know. I'm not a lawyer, but I know somebody like Charles Manson never killed anyone. Yes, he did cultivate, a number of young people, right? And sort of twist their minds into believing some kind of crazy fantasy. But it was they that committed the murders of Sharon Tate and others. Charles Manson was not present. But Charles Manson was convicted and died in prison. So how much does speech affect the outcome of a situation? In other words, in most jurisdictions, there is a charge inciting a riot or incitement to riot. You don't necessarily have to tell people to go and commit a criminal act, but if what you are saying in their mind suggests that is what you want them to do and they go commit that crime, typically you are held responsible as being just as liable as the person who committed the act. Somehow, they're saying it's not the case with former President Trump. And
well, you know what I want to say is, you mentioned it, conspiracy.
Right.
All right. Conspiracy is one of the easiest charges to be convicted of. And all you have to do is paint the picture. It was clearly a conspiracy. If he doesn't get found guilty on anything else, he should be convicted of conspiracy. He conspired with his cabinet people, his key people, his inner circle people, who delegated his wishes and his orders down to all those misguided Trump supporters, Americans, and I feel sorry for them. You know what I mean? Because when you believe in something, when you believe in somebody, you believe in them. In for a penny, in for a pound, until you're convinced somebody showed you that you're wrong.
Right.
And I think the court showed them that they were wrong when it was trial. And a lot of them fell on the sword and said, you know what? Had I known it was illegal, I wouldn't have did it. Had I known the election fraud was a lie, I wouldn't have did it. You know what I mean? So what I'm saying to you is this, Ron. On the stage on January himself,
he did,
and gave marching orders. You know what I mean? As did all those other people in his circle. So if you are a true believer, right? I'm going to use Christianity.
Okay.
All right. You're a true believer in Christianity. So you believe in Jesus Christ. You believe that he was resurrected, and you believe that he's going to come back one day to straighten out the world.
Right.
You're a believer. You believe in that, right? So Donald Trump became their Jesus Christ. He became their God. So they were true believers. So if they can be convicted for being a believer and a follower of Donald Trump, should the Christian be held the same way and be convicted of being a believer and follower of Jesus Christ? Because guess what? The Bible says has a lot of conflicting stories.
It does.
In it, especially in regards to slavery, and so on and so forth. So because you're a Christian, you be prosecuted for some of your Christian beliefs and some of the things that you do based on what the Bible tells you, because you're a believer. Well,
the Bible does say that would happen, right? That the believers would suffer because of their belief. But you brought up an interesting point, and I think that for a lot of the people that were invited down to DC, and for those that were directed by the former president to go to the Capitol. Now, it's true, Trump did not say that he wanted there to be a violent insurrection. He did not say that. But
Ron,
you know what happened?
If the night before, fight like hell.
Yeah, but you know something? The night before, this actually started on January 5th. On January 5th, a number of people got up on stage and began the process of whipping the crowd into a frenzy. Those people, like Mike Flynn, like Rudy Giuliani, like Roger Stone, they were conspicuously absent on January 6th. See, they did their stuff. They whipped up the crowd and then they disappeared. Donald Trump issued pardons for both Roger Stone and Mike Flynn. So it may be possible that the people who were in DC, who went into the Capitol, maybe they believed that the president was going to protect them. They were there to protect him and his presidency, and they may have believed that he would in turn protect them, their livelihoods, their families, and keep them out of jail, just like he did with Mike Flynn and Roger Stone.
And there lies the conspiracy.
Well, yeah. When you get together with another person or a group of persons and you conspired to commit a crime, yes, absolutely conspiracy. But the problem is the co-conspirators have been pardoned. You can't go back and prosecute them, at least on a federal level, for former President Trump. And again, right, I know a lot of people have a very different opinion as it relates to the president. And I would really like to hear other opinions as it relates to Donald Trump and what happened on January 6th. I mean, here we have now passed the 2-year, 3-year anniversary of what happened on that fateful day. And it seems as if now, in hindsight, people are kind of drifting away from President Trump and his style of governance. Because all before, Trump said it himself, I could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue and not lose a vote.
Absolutely.
And he was right. He had that much support.
Absolutely, he did. Well, Ron, I can say this much.
Mm-hmm.
In the beginning, Donald Trump was considered a breath of fresh air
Mm-hmm.
in regards to politics.
Right.
Now, because me too, I was a believer in the theory that maybe the country would be run better with a civilian as opposed to a lifetime politician.
Right.
All right. That he could come in and shake up things and make rational decisions as a non-political citizen.
Mm-hmm.
That he could come in because he would have no allegiances to the big,
Corporate America.
big corporations.
Right.
You know what I mean? And the lobbyists and so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't know anybody. So he could make rational decisions. So I was a believer in that,
Mm-hmm.
And Donald Trump lost me as a supporter the moment he said what he said about the Mexicans and the South Americans.
And black people.
Yes.
Yes.
He lost me when he said, grab him by the pussy.
Right.
He lost me when he made it perfectly clear that aside from him being a civilian with no allegiances to the lobbyists and big corporations.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not gonna say big corporations, I'm just gonna say the lobbyists.
Right.
Because he was a part of the big corporations.
Yeah.
Right. But that's where he lost me at, because him being a rational thinker and just a regular human being with morals went out the window. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that you can be the president of the United States and be moralist. You have to have some sense of morals. And that's where he lost me at. You know what I mean? Because as I told you before, years ago, me and my ex-wife lived in a Trump building.
Oh.
In Queens.
Mm-hmm.
Right on Highland Avenue on 166th Street. That was a building that his father owned. And, I lived in that building, I think it was called Sussex Hall or something like that. I lived in that building for 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? I knew he was serious about his money, because guess what? Let you not pay your rent within 3 days, by the 5th day, you had a late notice on your door.
Mm-hmm.
So he needed your money.
Right.
You know what I mean? And, back then, we wasn't doing direct payments. You know what I mean? You wrote your check, either you dropped it downstairs, or you put it in the mail.
Right.
So however long the mail take you to get it, you can drop your check in the mail. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But if they ain't put it on their books by the 5th, the maintenance man was walking around putting notices on your door.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? To embarrass you that you didn't pay your rent.
Right.
You know what I mean? So as a businessman, he was a strange bird. But those poor people who believed in him, regardless of what he did and said, because he used fear that they were being replaced.
Right.
You know what I mean? What I can understand is we can push forward the replacement theory, but we can't push forward critical race theory. But that's another conversation.
Right.
You know?
Well, I just think that in terms of morality, I don't know if that exists in DC. I don't know if it ever did. And, because with just total fairness to the former president, when the documents were discovered at Mar-a-Lago, our current president, Joe Biden, was very vocal about that.
Yes, he was.
And now we find out that he has removed possibly sensitive documents from the White House and has them in his, private residence.
Well,
and now they're trying to say, well, it's not the same thing. Well, look,
it's the same thing.
And you know something, in this country, I think we've forgotten. It maybe it's something that, generations after us have learned, and we just didn't get the memo. Our generation, we were taught 2 rights don't make a wrong.
Right.
I'm sorry. Yeah, 2 wrongs don't make a right. Right? 2 wrongs don't make a right. So if you do something, I do the same thing. It doesn't make it right.
That's right.
So for the Biden administration to try to say it's not the same thing, I'm sorry, it is.
Well,
you cannot be hypocritical and say what you did was horrible. What you did violated, the public trust, and it put, this country in jeopardy in terms of people getting sensitive intel. We did the same thing.
Well, let me tell you this. I wasn't a fan of Biden either. And I'm going to say that because Trump went so far to the left or to the right, whichever way whatever you want to call it.
Way to the right.
He went so far off the rails that Biden got my vote because we needed to get rid of Trump.
Mm-hmm.
It's not so much that I voted for Biden, I voted against Trump.
Right.
You know what I mean? And that's why I voted against Trump. And because I have lifelong issues with Joe Biden.
Mm-hmm.
I had an issue when Obama chose him to be because he can say what he wanted today, but I remember all the things that he did as a congressman, as a senator, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? He had no love for us.
Well, the big one was the crime bill. Yeah, that was a big one, right? That was under Clinton, but he was a senator, and he was vocal on that as well, on the passage of the crime bill, which put generations of Black and brown men in jail. Some still in jail to this day, right? So, we're dealing with a lot of hypocrisy in DC. And one of the things that former President Trump said he was going to do was drain the swamp. He was going to go down there and right the ship in DC.
I like that idea.
Well, it was a great idea. But, if you think about it.
But he was the swamp.
Well, if you think about it, right? He said the right things, but was he the right person? If we had someone, and regardless of your political party, if you have someone who says with sincerity, look, we need to go down to Washington and we need to clean this mess up because we're bordering on it being too late. If it's not too late already. Down in DC right now, the Trump effect has torn apart the Republican Party.
Yes, it has.
Prior to this last president, President Donald J. Trump, the Republican Party stayed on message. You would not see the Republicans, you would rarely see them going off message, right? One said it, the other said it, and they stayed on message. And that's one of ways they were so effective in winning elections. Yes, there was some gerrymandering and voter suppression, but they managed to stay somewhat cohesive. And now it took 15 votes to get a speaker. Initially, Hakeem Jeffries was getting more votes for the speakership than McCarthy, and the Republicans have the majority in the Senate. Now what you have is these rogue senators who are saying, or who forced Senator McCarthy to agree to rules that says one senator can disagree with the speaker and call for a vote of no confidence to have the speaker removed. And McCarthy signed off on it. So he has the gavel right now, but can he hold on to it? So that's the current state of affairs for the Republican Party. And on top of that, Donald Trump is saying he's running again in 2024. So next year, the merry-go-round starts again. With a fractured Republican Party and with a vote with the people, the American people, still sharply divided, what happens in 2024? As yet, Biden has not announced that he's running for re-election, which I know even members of the Democratic Party don't want to see him run again. And I'll say unequivocally, I don't want to see him run again. Joe Biden, I think, is 80, 82, something like that. And look,
he's too old.
And you know what? I don't want to say that he's incapable, but the fact of the matter is, well, you got to figure, Biden has been in D.C. since 1972. That is a lifetime of politics. So it is time to step aside and get some new blood, some new thoughts, some new ideas, because the old ideas have sank this country. $31 trillion in debt. And they're talking about we've reached the debt ceiling. There ain't no debt ceiling. That's right. All they're going to do is raise it again.
Yeah, absolutely.
And when we reach that next ceiling, they'll just raise it again. You're right. There's no real debt ceiling.
You're right. Right. Well, you know what? I want to say this. Good, bad, or indifferent, nobody's above the law.
That's true.
Donald Trump did break the law. So he should be held accountable by a jury of somewhat more or less his peers.
Right.
So I say that to say that, he should be brought up on charges and let the jury decide. And if they say he's not guilty, then so be it.
Right.
If they say he's guilty, so be it. But he should not be above the law. Now, on the other side, Joe Biden, just because you didn't try to resist and say you own those documents, that they're your personal documents, all some of the things that Trump said, doesn't make you innocent. Because Guess what? If it's marked classified or high classified or how it's determined, you knew you had them.
Right.
You know what I mean? And it was your responsibility to make sure they were returned. In my opinion, they should stop that taking stuff home altogether.
And you're 100% right.
You know what I mean? And then you won't have that problem. So guess what? If the Republican Party do an investigation on Biden, and they find that there should be charges brought against Joe Biden for the same thing that they are considering charges against Donald Trump, so be it. Well, let a jury of his peers decide, because guess what? In my opinion, they're two old-ass men who should just go somewhere and ride the wave out till the end of time. Just go. Because we need young people who can relate to young people. You know what I mean? Because guess what? I don't care how many grandchildren they got, right? I ain't seen Donald Trump make a TikTok video yet. I ain't seen Biden do a TikTok video, right? I haven't even heard any of them say that they play video games.
Right.
How can you relate to these people who grew up in the technology era?
Right.
You know what I mean? How can you reach these kids, these Generation X's and whatever they are today? You know what I mean? How can you reach them? You have nothing in common with them.
Well, you really can't, right? Because you said it. They don't have much in common. I think Biden's appeal was he comes across as, Grandpa Biden, right? The caring, understanding guy who's, comes from a blue collar background here in Scranton, Pennsylvania. Well, Donald Trump and so many others, and not just Trump, these folks were elitist.
Yes.
But they managed to rebrand themselves as just the average Joe. And again, it's not just Biden. The Bush family.
Mm-hmm.
The Bush family has roots going back to Europe, where they were wealthy in Europe. These are the blue bloods.
Mm-hmm.
And they rebranded themselves as hardworking Texans, who are just the average Joe. Mm-hmm. No, they're not from Texas.
That's right.
The Bush family is from right here on the East Coast. New York and Connecticut is where they live. In fact, George H.W. Bush, the first President Bush, his father was an executive with Citibank, or what it was called during that time. So the Bush family initially was in the banking industry, and they did that for years until they found out, well, there's a lot of money to be made in oil. And then they moved to Texas and rebranded themselves as Texans who are hardworking folk, right? So it wasn't just Donald Trump that did that. But he did it so skillfully that people who were not even thought of in the political process, I mean, people out in Appalachia, places like that, who the government had basically forgotten about, well, they responded to Trump.
Mm-hmm.
They said, finally somebody understands. Finally somebody hears me. And that's something that, our politicians have forgotten.
Well, I want to say this, Ron.
Uh-huh.
A lot of people didn't like Donald Trump. And a lot of people still don't like Donald Trump.
Mm-hmm.
Right? What I'm thinking is this. Donald Trump used fear to the best of his ability. All right. A lot of people knew Donald Trump wasn't shit from top to bottom. They knew it. The things that he said, the way he behaved, the way he treated ran his business, and the way he treated contractors and so on. People knew he wasn't a good man, right? But he used fear.
Mm-hmm.
And let me tell you something. That replacement theory was something that laid heavy on Americans. All right? Not me and you.
Right.
But on Caucasian Americans who had clan roots. All right? And I'm going to say that because when they think about it, one thing about them, they pay attention to history.
Mm-hmm.
When people say never again, they mean that. And that didn't just apply to our Jewish brothers and sisters. Never again. Just like African Americans, never again. We're gonna fight to the end. We'll never be enslaved again, right? But when you follow history and you realize that what happened in North Africa, when the people in Africa looked like me and you, and they were even darker,
right,
in North Africa. But the Europeans and Caucasians went into North Africa. And because they started to integrate with the Africans because they were there, it wasn't enough Europeans there to say, I'm going to have a European wife, or I'm going to have a European husband. What happened? They started, having interracial relationships in North Africa. So what happened to the people in North Africa? They became light-skinned, right? Therein allowed the browning of North Africa. So history done showed them what can happen when you have interracial relationships, right? Now, you look at all the immigrants that has moved to North America over the last 50 years.
Mhm.
I'm just going to say the last 50 years, right? And you were told that you are the majority in the United States of America.
Mhm.
But you were paying attention to interracial relationships and the browning of America. Because it ain't just the browning because of me and you, it's the browning because of the brown people, the yellow people, the red people, right? So now you're no longer the majority,
Mhm.
right? But guess what? It was on the horizon.
Well,
Because let me tell you,
Mhm.
when they created Planned Parenthood, you know, um, that wasn't created for people of color. Well, actually, it was created for people of color. Let me just say that. Let me fix that. You know, they wanted to slow the birth rate of people of color.
Mhm.
But people of color kept doing what they were doing. They had nothing else to do, so they made babies. They had 10 children, 15 children, 12 children, 5 children. But with Planned Parenthood, white America really brought into Planned Parenthood. So they had 2 children. If they had their daughter and their son, they shut down. We got what we need. We have a daughter, we have a son. We're going to have our house with our picket fence, and we're good. You know what I mean? Honey, take that birth control pill. Or, you know what? Don't worry about the birth. I'm going to go have a vasectomy, right? So just those things from Planned Parenthood drove the numbers down of Caucasians in America, while the blacks in America was doing what they always did. They had large families.
Mhm.
The Hispanics had large families. Even the Asians had large families. In fact, they had families so large that over in China, they said that, you know what?
They had the one child rule.
You had the one child rule.
Mhm.
And guess what? If you had a daughter, put her up for adoption, send her out the country. Because we don't need no more women making babies in China. So this ain't something that's new. Everybody know what was going on. The thing is that the people who brought into it, it affected them largely. And then when they did history and they looked at the browning of North America, the browning of America, they said, damn, we on the track to be extinct like the dinosaurs. And it's not going to take a damn media to do it.
Well, you know something? The reality is, those that are in the know realize that Europeans were never a majority in this country.
We know that.
They told us they were, but
They tell a lie long enough becomes the truth.
right. And you know, the whole idea of fear mongering has always been alive and well in America, and it still is. You know, if you go back in 1915, I think it was, D.W. Griffith released a movie called Birth of a Nation. That movie depicted black people as being savages that would attack innocent white women and rape them and pillage. Well, when that movie was distributed, of course, it invoked fear in people, Caucasian people, fear that exists to this day. So yes, politicians do prey on those old fears to get elected. And yes, Donald Trump, amongst others, used those fears to get into office. And I say amongst others because I remember when George H.W. Bush was running, there was a black man by the name of Willie Horton. You remember that story?
Yes, I do.
So he used the Horton story in order to invoke those old fears, right? That your women and children are not safe when black men are around. So, yes, that form of prejudice is still very much alive in America, and it's going to stay alive as long as we have politicians that will seek to divide the population.
You're right.
And you know what they do, and I'm talking about politicians, So after Dr. King was assassinated, and I'll be remiss if I don't send a shout out to this warrior, this man who was our Moses here in America, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. His birthday just passed on the 15th, and we would be remiss if we did not say thank you and happy birthday to this man who meant so much to us and, in fact, to the world. But after Dr. King was assassinated, the government, not the black people of this country, decided that in order to sort of atone for the death of Dr. King, they came up with a number of pieces of legislation that later became known as affirmative action. We did not ask for affirmative action. They gave us affirmative action. Later on,
absolutely, because they didn't want to create two Americas.
They did not, right? So they gave us affirmative action. Then later on, when Caucasian men began to grumble about the economy and job losses, which the corporations were behind sending jobs overseas, the politician says, you see, those black folks are getting the jobs that you're supposed to get.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't ask for affirmative action. Nope. Just as European men didn't ask their jobs to be sent overseas. So the politicians played both sides of the card.
Well,
you turn one against the other.
That's right.
And then you say, you know what? I'm on both of your sides. I think that, you should be able to live in peace and harmony, black folks. But at the same time, to Europeans, you guys deserve good paying jobs. And nobody gets anything.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Well, you know what, Ron? Everything that we are discussing here is a part of the big picture. Right?
Very big picture.
But at the end of the day, somebody got to be held accountable for the ways and actions of the people.
Right.
Donald Trump needs to be prosecuted and convicted for what he did because people lost their lives. Think about that young woman who got shot inside the Capitol.
Mm-hmm.
She believed in him 100%.
She did.
She believed that everything that he said was right. Mm-hmm. She believed that the election was stolen from him. Mm-hmm. And the man knew nothing was stolen from him. She lost her life. He should be brought up on charge. He should be charged with involuntary manslaughter for that woman's life because she went based upon the lie he told.
And the police officer who died.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
All those people,
mm-hmm.
lives were lost. So my opinion is indict him, put him in front of a jury of his peers, as they call it, and let the courts decide. No Supreme Court get involved, none of that crap.
Mm-hmm.
Let 24 Americans, I say 24 because you're going to need at least 24 to be a part of that jury pool. To be a part of that jury, you're going to need these 12 juries.
Mm-hmm.
Lay out the evidence and let.
Mm-hmm.
And if they think that he's not guilty, then he's not guilty.
Well, yeah, theoretically, that's where it should go.
Same thing with Biden.
And not, realistically, they say you cannot indict a sitting president, but why not?
Why not?
They've created
a crook is a crook.
Absolutely.
By saying that you can indict a sitting president, you just said that they're above the law.
And that is the message that we're sending. And what they have done, they've created, I guess, a policy for themselves called executive privilege. It's not in the Constitution.
Kind of like white privilege.
Right. It's not in the Constitution anywhere.
No.
But they have invoked this executive privilege going back to Nixon when he sent the White House plumbers to break in to Democratic headquarters. So Nixon, I guess he's sort of writing on the wall. He resigned and got out of D.C. with the quickness. Because, during that time, the evidence was overwhelming. The people that went into the Watergate building were saying, hey, wait a minute. Tricky Dick sent us in there. We didn't just do this on our own. So he knew the writing was on the wall. It was just a matter of time. But since that time,
and they even disbarred his attorney.
Right. But since that time, we have used this doctrine of executive privilege to apply to the president. Now, wait a second. So you're the CEO of Gynesis, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So why can't you invoke executive privilege? As the chief executive of the company, why can't you invoke executive privilege to say, wait a minute, I can't be indicted because I'm the chief executive?
Not happening.
Exactly. But how can they do it and get away with it?
Well, the system is set up in a way that the guilty should never be held accountable. You should be able to retire with all the money you stole and live your life out in exile in New Jersey.
You know what? And that's what happens, right?
Well, hey, look, that's what happened to Nixon. A lot of people didn't realize that. Nixon lived in New Jersey for a real long time.
Laying low.
Yeah, he up there in Upper Saddlebrook. He lived up there for a long time. I found that out some years back. It was not long after he died. I said, this joke was in New Jersey. We thought he was in California. He was in New Jersey. How about that?
Yeah, I mean, the people who have done the most damage have been involved in some of the worst political decisions in this country's history. Well, they have never been brought before a court of law. I mean, and this is just my opinion. From the Nixon administration, there's one notable character that's still alive, and that's Henry Kissinger.
Mm-hmm.
Henry Kissinger was heavily involved in the decision-making process to widen the war in Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
The bombing campaigns of countries like Laos and Cambodia that were not involved in the war. We bombed those people too. We killed, I think the total was 4 million Vietnamese, Laotians, and Cambodians over the 10 years we were fighting in Vietnam. A war that we should not have been involved in the first place.
And once the French got their behind kicked,
we should
have went in there.
And what we were doing,
the Haitians kicked the French ass. So
right.
Guess what?
Right. So what we were doing was
habitual losers.
Right. We were backing a colonial power, right?
Mm-hmm. Trying
to maintain their control over one of their colonies. Because, during that time, that entire area was called French Indochina.
Mm-hmm.
So the French had, people in Vietnam speaking French.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So Ho Chi Minh decided, I just want freedom for my people. And he became a demon, just like Nat Turner, and so many others in this country who only wanted freedom. So America has a very complicated history. And
why do you think they don't want it taught?
That's the reason, because it is complicated. And the truth, the Bible says, shall make you free. And if people begin to read and understand what has happened in America, yes, it will change their view of this country. Now they're talking about banning books. And in Texas, they are rewriting history. In Texas, I think it's already in process. They're writing history books that denies the existence of the transatlantic slave trade. Essentially, what they're saying in Texas is that black people came to this country
with smiles on their face.
Well, yeah, in the 17th century, 16th, 17th century, came here as essentially long-distance commuters. We left Africa and apparently chained ourselves into the holds of ships and came here looking for opportunity. What opportunity was there in America for Africans in the 16th and 17th century?
Absolutely none.
Well, I wouldn't say none, because there were black folks that owned slaves and that had plantations. But it was pretty much close to zero. You were a slave or a laborer, or you were fortunate enough to amass enough wealth to have your own plantation. But you still enslaved people that look like you. So that aspect of history, they want to completely rewrite. They want to take it out of the books. And once that happens, generations from now, people will no longer be aware of what happened, this tragedy.
But you want to know what the wild card is going to be?
What's that?
Google. Google is going to be the wild card, because you know what? The people who run Google, they're already using, that IA, artificial AI.
AI, yeah.
Right? Guess what? Zuckerberg and all those people in the high-tech world, they're not going to let that happen, because that's going to be in the future. That's going to be the thorn on their side, and that's what's going to be the money grab. True history and true knowledge.
Well, you got to understand something, right? When you win the war, you tell the story the way you want it to be told.
Absolutely.
So America wants to rewrite the story, and they want to reshape what happened. Yes, things like Google, search engines, Google, Wikipedia. And Wikipedia, they get public funding, right? You see the appeals for a couple of dollars here, a couple of dollars there, so they can continue to operate. But when you go to school and children are legally, it's mandatory they attend school, what are they going to teach them in generations to come? In fact, what are they teaching them now? You mentioned before critical race theory. They don't want to touch that. They don't want that in schools. That's one of the things that Trump and others have said they would not allow. Trump said that it was dangerous. I don't quite understand what's dangerous about history, actual history, what happened in this country. Why is it dangerous? Why is it a threat? And who is it a threat to? And I had hoped that we would get some callers that would give us their take on, if you believe Donald Trump is innocent, I'd like to know why. And I'm sure there would be some very valid reasons.
Well, let me tell you this.
Mm-hmm.
So many people have backed away from Donald Trump.
Yes.
If you pay close attention to your timeline, my timeline had people from the left and the right on it,
mm-hmm.
right? And those people are still there, right? They have taken down the Trump sign.
Mm-hmm.
They have taken down the flag. Hell, they're not even flying the American flag anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Because, at one point, that American flag and that police flag went hand in hand with the Trump flag.
Mm-hmm.
They have removed flags altogether. Even in my community where I live at, there's one guy up there who have his Proud Boy flag up.
Mm-hmm.
One guy. I ride past his house all the time, But all those Trump signs and all those flags that was out there, they're gone, man.
Well, you raised an interesting point. Right now, the leader of the Proud Boys is on trial.
Mm-hmm.
And if you recall, Donald Trump said, I believe it was in a debate, he told the Proud Boys,
stand down and stand by.
Right. Stand back and stand by. Right.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't denounce,
Nope.
The violent rhetoric. He just said, stand by.
Mm-hmm.
So what message were you sending to the Proud Boys? And now that
January
their leader,
6th, we're going to need you.
right. But now that their leader is on trial. Where is Trump? Where is the pardon for him? I think his name is Tario.
Guess what?
Where's his pardon?
He does not have pardon power anymore.
He did. When he did have pardon power, before he left office, he made sure he insulated Roger Stone, Mike Flynn, right? He made sure he insulated them.
He didn't insulate Giuliani, though.
And I was just going to say that. Giuliani wanted a pardon as well, right? He wanted his get out of jail free card. And
he had to have a fall guy.
Right. And he didn't get it. And right now, you don't hear nothing from Giuliani. When Trump was president,
you want to hear something about?
He was very vocal. He had a whole lot to say.
You want to hear something?
What's that?
He's playing the dementia card.
Is that what he's doing?
He's playing the dementia card.
Well, you know what? They have medical facilities in jail for people with dementia.
Absolutely.
They can keep them segregated, and they can see that they get their medicine 3-4 times a day. But yeah, there's room in jail for people with health issues, because there's people in jail right now with health issues, with dementia, and they're still in jail. So for Giuliani, who wanted his get out of jail free card and didn't get it, you know, a lot of
he
these
should be
folks,
the first one turned on Trump.
Well, after Alan Weisselberg, his accountant, who gave evidence,
and he got a crazy Eddie deal,
right? So I think he had 90 days or something, right?
That he just started,
right? But there'll be other people, for Giuliani, right? There's a special on CNN, What Happened to America's Mayor. I don't know when he ever was America's mayor, but I know
only after 9/11.
Well, but in New York, right? Giuliani was a very divisive character.
Yes, sir.
I worked for the city when Giuliani became mayor. And one of the things he did, when you talk about what they call a race card, I remember Giuliani had a rally and hundreds of city cops showed up. And they were using racial slurs in the crowd. And Giuliani never corrected them. He only whipped them up, inflamed the situation. So anything you can do to get elected, you do.
Yeah.
And he did that. He played the race card, and he played it well. And he did the same thing with Al Sharpton, saying the demonstrations were for political reasons, not because people were being slaughtered in the street by police officers or the economic pressures, but for political reasons. But it's been another, hour of just, building with myself and TP Square. Hopefully next week, my partner in time will be back, and we'll come at you with another interesting show, on topics that are relevant. So for those of you that are listening, continue to support Gynesis Radio. It is so important that we maintain independent sources of information, because all of the media is corporate control. The information you're getting is filtered. Sometimes not even real information. One thing I agree with, what Trump said, sometimes, yes, it is fake news. So folks, I had hoped that we would hear from you today, but you know what? Go on to the Facebook page, Ron and Romano. Go on to Gynesis page and give us your input. What do you honestly feel about former President Trump? Guilt or innocence? So I thank you for being with us today, myself and TP Square. And I hope you have a good Saturday. And we'll see you again next Saturday. Peace.